The Naga struggle for independence is one of the longest-running conflicts in South Asia, marked by decades of political, ethnic, and armed insurgency. It stems from the Naga people's desire for self-determination and independence from India, rooted in their distinct cultural identity, history, and grievances over governance. The Nagas are an indigenous ethnic group living primarily in Nagaland and parts of neighboring states like Manipur, Assam, Arunachal Pradesh, and even across the border in Myanmar. For centuries, the Nagas lived as independent tribes with distinct customs, languages, and governance systems. During British colonial rule, the Naga Hills were administered separately, under excluded areas, meaning they were largely isolated from mainstream Indian administration. In 1918, the Naga Club was formed by educated Naga leaders to represent their interests. The club petitioned the Simon Commission in 1929, stating that the Nagas should be left alone to govern themselves after the British left India. This marked the beginning of organized political activity among Nagas. When India gained independence in 1947, the Nagas opposed integration into the Indian Union. They argued that they had never been part of India historically and wanted to remain independent. This led to tensions between Naga leaders and Indian authorities. In June 1947, a 9-point agreement was signed between the Naga National Council, led by A.Z. Fitzo, and Akbar Haidari, then governor of Assam. The agreement granted autonomy to Nagas within India, but fell short of independence. The Nagas interpreted it as a step toward eventual sovereignty, while India viewed it as a framework for integration. In 1951, A.Z. Fitzo organized a plebiscite, where 99% of participants reportedly voted for independence from India. Following this, Fitzo declared Nagaland an independent state on August 14, 1947, a day before India's independence. However, this declaration was not recognized by India. The Indian government rejected Naga demands for independence and sent military forces into the region to assert control. This led to widespread discontent among Nagas and eventually escalated into an armed insurgency. The Naga National Council formed an armed wing called the Naga Federal Army in the early 1950s. The Indian government responded with heavy militarization of Nagaland under laws like the Armed Forces Special Powers Act, or AFSPA, in 1958. AFSPA gave sweeping powers to security forces in disturbed areas, leading to, allegations of human rights abuses against civilians. The conflict intensified during the late 1950s and early 1960s. Villages were burned down, people were displaced, and thousands lost their lives in clashes between insurgents and Indian forces. To address Naga grievances politically, the Indian government created Nagaland as a separate state in 1963, with special constitutional provisions under Article 371A. This article granted significant autonomy to Nagaland regarding religious practices, customary laws, ownership of land and resources, and so on. However, many Naga leaders viewed this as insufficient since their primary demand was outright independence. Over time, divisions emerged within the Naga movement. In 1980, a faction broke away from the NNC to form the National Socialist Council of Nagaland, or NSCN. In 1988, NSCN itself split into two groups, NSCN-IM, led by Isak Chishi Swu and Thuingalang Muiva, and NSCN-K, led by SS Kaplang. These factions pursued different strategies but shared common goals of sovereignty or greater autonomy. One central demand is for Greater Nagalim, which seeks to unify all Naga-inhabited areas across Nagaland, Manipur, Arunachal Pradesh, Assam, and parts of Myanmar into one administrative unit. This demand has faced resistance from neighboring states due to fears of territorial loss. Naga groups like NSCN-IM have demanded a separate constitution and flag for Nagaland as part of any peace deal with India. These demands are seen as symbols of sovereignty, but have been contentious during negotiations with India. After decades of armed conflict that caused immense suffering among civilians and insurgents alike, a ceasefire agreement was signed between NSCN, IM, and the Indian government in 1997. Similar agreements were later signed with other factions like NSCN, K. In August 2015, NSCN, IM, signed a framework agreement with the Government of India under Prime Minister Narendra Modi's leadership. While details were not made public initially, it was seen as a major step toward resolving the conflict peacefully. However, the agreement remains incomplete due to disagreements over key issues like Greater Nagalim and constitutional provisions. Other factions like NSCN, K, have not fully participated in peace talks. Fragmentation among insurgent groups. The presence of multiple factions with differing goals complicates negotiations. Opposition from neighboring states like Manipur strongly oppose Greater Nagalim due to fears of losing territory. Human rights concerns. Decades of militarization under AFSPA have led to allegations of abuse against civilians. Trust deficit. Many Nagas distrust India's intentions due to historical grievances. The Naga struggle remains unresolved despite ongoing peace talks. While violence has reduced significantly due to ceasefires, political demands like Greater Nagalim remain contentious. The issue continues to symbolize broader questions about ethnic identity and self-determination within India's federal structure. The resolution requires balancing Naga aspirations with concerns from neighboring states, while addressing historical grievances through meaningful dialogue and trust-building measures.